What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. We're coming to you after the Cavs' latest win. Chris, that still hasn't gotten annoying to say. I mean, they won against the Toronto Raptors on Thursday night, 132-126. And just to get the stats out of the way, they're 33-4 overall, best in the NBA, 20-1 at home, best in the NBA, 16-1 since December 1st, 10-0 when scoring 130 points or more, 21-0 when shooting 50% or better from the field. This is also their 12th straight victory, longest active streak in the NBA. And Chris, I know we love talking about how this team has grown and all the other records that are coming along with the season, but this one feels just eye-popping. They have doubled the franchise record of the amount of 130-point or more games in a season. The original record was 5 coming into the year. They have 10. It is January 10th, Chris. Can you just explain how good this team has been, one, a little bit further than what the stats do, but also what you saw in this game from the Cavs that wasn't all that pretty after one of the most exciting and most beautiful games that we've seen all year?
Ethan, the short answer is this is a historically great offense. They're doing things that only the best teams in NBA history have done. If you want to talk about three-point percentage, if you want to talk about margin of victory, if you want to talk about offensive rating, if you want to talk about half-court efficiency, they are up there with the best offenses that we have ever seen in NBA history. We're talking about the dynastic Golden State Warriors. We're talking about last year's Boston Celtics. We're talking about the Chicago Bulls of the mid-90s. With Michael Jordan, you name it. We talk about the Cavs from the LeBron James era, with the core, with the big three, this core four, this group together, and all of the guys that they have coming off the bench. Like, everybody has a specific role. Everybody is playing to that role. Everybody has made an impact. But this is, you hate using this term because you understand the NBA. And you understand the complexity of the NBA and you respect everybody across the NBA, this offense is unstoppable. It is. Like, the best hope for an opposing defense at this point in time is that the Cavs have an off night shooting the basketball. Or some other team on the other side gets really, really hot, abnormally hot, and they find a way to kind of like negate the advantages that the Cavs have going into every single game, every single night. But they can shoot the three with the Celtics and the top teams. They can score inside if they have to with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. They have timely cuts. They're one of the best teams in the NBA in points per cut. They're really, really good in the pick and roll because they have elite pick and roll players. It's just they can play so many different styles. And yeah, I mean, I think they're unstoppable. I think they have to beat themselves, or I think they have to help the opponent beat them. Let's put it that way.
And that's what JJ Redick said a couple weeks ago, that the Cavs simply don't do. And it's funny you mentioned that the opposing team has to shoot above their heads. Toronto did that. Yeah. They shot 60% from the field and 45% from deep. Like, they don't shoot like that. That's not the Toronto Raptors that every other team in the NBA has seen this season. And yet, they still fell to the Cavs when they shot 52.8% from the field and 40% from three. Like, and it felt like it was an off night until Darius Garland got it going, right? We talk about Darius Garland and how last season, Donovan Mitchell is a guy that the Cavs had to continuously go to, and they had to run the offense through him. And when he was out or when he was taking a rest day or whatever the situation might have been, Cavs fans hoped that Darius Garland would take over. And it wasn't that last year. This year it is. 40 points, a season high. He had 4 threes on 7 attempts. He was 14 of 22 from the field. And it's not like he wasn't facilitating either. He was an assist away from a double-double. He had 9 assists, and to go along with, there were almost 3 double-doubles in one game, Chris, with the Twin Towers and Evan Mobley and Jared Allen combining for another huge double-double again.
Mm. And look, you mentioned that, Darius took over and Kenny Atkinson said that Darius saved us. Um, that's what all-stars do, number one. But I felt like the turnaround for the Cavs started a little bit earlier than that, and I feel like Jared Allen started it. Second quarter, he had he had almost a double-double in one quarter by himself. The second quarter, he had 11 points and 9 rebounds in the second quarter. There were some dunks. There were some big offensive rebounds, second chance opportunities. When the Cavs offense wasn't really as rhythmic as it has been throughout the course of the year, it wasn't as free flowing as it has been throughout the course of the year. They weren't hitting shots at the same clip that they have grown accustomed to. Jarrett getting second chance opportunities, Jarrett rescuing possessions and allowing them, multiple looks. That was really, really important for the Cavs. And that happened in the second quarter. And I feel like that's almost forgotten in some ways from this game against Toronto, because the Raptors again built their lead to 11 in the second half, and the Cavs had to again come back from 11 down, and Darius was the orchestrator of that particular comeback. But I do feel like Jarrett had his fingerprints all over this one, at a time that the Cavs were kind of sleepwalking through the game. They didn't really have it going. There wasn't a lot of energy from the team. You could tell. I mean, Evan Mobley was talking to me in the locker room after the game, and he said we were dead, basically. Like, that's how they felt, emotionally, physically exhausted after everything that transpired over the previous 24 hours with the Oklahoma City game. And, Jarrett brought the energy. Jarrett provided a spark. Jarrett, like I said, got those offensive rebounds. He got in transition. He scored in the half court. And that was really, really important to have like somebody else supplement the offense and somebody else kind of like share the load at a point where it seemed like the Cavs were in danger of going down, 18-20 at one point in the first half. And Jarrett helped them not do that. And then Darius, obviously, he was great throughout the course of the night, and he certainly finished it off with some clutch plays down the stretch, which has been, his calling card this year, and it's been a question about Darius in past years. So he's kind of like flipping that narrative, which is really, really good to see.
And I think it's important that you mentioned the Jarrett piece, and I'm glad you did, because I feel like there's 2 other players that I'm going to get into shortly about how they also impacted this game, even though it was one that Darius Garland took over, and we can admit that. But like JA being able to play against some of the best bigs in the league. Obviously, last night it was Isaiah Hartenstein, and before the game, Kenny Atkinson said that Hartenstein was the big in the NBA, right? So you think about how difficult it is to have a successful game against him, and then Jarrett did that. Then you look at games against Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Jarrett didn't shy away from any of those competitions, and it was because of his not only physicality, but the processing that he's learned over the last couple of years of being able to slow the game down and take advantage of mismatches and switches, and also just utilizing his passing ability, which we have seen this season, and we also talked to him last year about it growing then. So I think it's really interesting about how Jarrett has grown into his own, and it hasn't necessarily been exactly how fans or people might have wanted, because it's not him just ramming a shoulder into somebody every single time down the floor. It's him finding his own way to do it each and every time and each and every possession.
Yeah, I was talking about Jarrett to somebody before the game, Ethan, and it's like I have such a great appreciation for Jarrett, and I feel like my appreciation for Jarrett may be higher than most people because I see it on a daily basis. And it's not always pretty, and it's not always the things that you think about. It's not always the things that you see on TikTok or Instagram or House of Highlights or any of these other modern day hip things. right? It's just like the little things that contribute to winning basketball. That's where my appreciation comes from when it comes to Jared Allen. It's the number of screens that he sets on a nightly basis. It's the times that he has to battle guys in the post, box them out, whether he gets the rebound or his teammate gets the rebound, right? It's the number of different times that he's forced to switch onto a guard and be in an uncomfortable position and he's got to hold his own. It's just like so many of the little things. It's like making the calls on the defensive end of the floor so that everybody is in the spot where they should be. It's those kinds of things that aren't sexy, they aren't flashy, they sometimes get overlooked, but I appreciate them to the highest level. And I think everybody around this team appreciates them to the highest level as well, because they're just not the team that they are without Jared Allen. He is so important at both ends of the floor to their success. And it doesn't have to be double doubles. It doesn't have to be 25 points the other night against Oklahoma City. It doesn't have to be like, it's unfortunate to me, and I know it's part of the gig, but it's unfortunate to me that there can't be like equal appreciation for every single member of the core four. Like there has to be the one guy, just like in the Big Three era, it was always Kevin Love. Like, why aren't you doing more, Kevin Love? And it was Chris Bosh for the Heatles. You know what I'm saying? Like the last member of any grouping is always the one who's the easiest to criticize, always the one who is the easiest to overlook. But like the importance, it's so hard to say, like the importance of Jared Allen is not on the same level as Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, because like it is. It's just not the same kinds of things that you appreciate from each one of those guys.
And Chris, like the best part about Jared Allen is he doesn't care. It has no effect on him. Well,
Right.
okay, like to on surface level, what Kenny?
Yeah.
Let me say it how Kenny Atkinson said it. From what Kenny Atkinson told us today, like it doesn't affect Jared. Like he pushes the like narrative in another direction. They don't draw plays for Jared. Right. He doesn't ask for plays to be drawn for him. He is very willing, and you see it in the post game interviews. Like he loves talking about his teammates. He loves letting them have the spotlight. And a part of that is because Jared is not that kind of person. He doesn't relish the spotlight. He's very to himself. And to just, I might put this in somehow, but Darius's description of J.A. tonight was hilarious.
Yeah. Jay is like the cousin that's like kind of standoffish, but like still in the family, you know? So I be trying to get a good balance of Jay, because like Jay would sit all the way in the front of the bus, but then come talk to us at dinner and like just have like a regular great conversation. But then like if Jay is not feeling you tonight or like that day, like you have to go over there and talk to him like, so what you doing on your PC now? Or like what you building now? So you know it's but he's great for our group though, because he brings so much energy on the floor, and then he's hilarious off the floor. So like that fits our character. But then like he has that quiet side as well, when like you really want to bring him into the family, to like the funny category. So like that's when you just have to like just reel him in, like, let's go Jay, come on. But I don't know if that answers your question, but I mean that's my dog though. Jay, that's my road dog, that's my brother. So he's always gonna be in our family for sure.
There were times during the game where he was tired because he hadn't had to shoulder a kind of load like that today, or that he did today in previous games, and it requires a different amount of exertion on the offensive end. And when he was tired, the Cavs turned to two different players, and as well as Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, obviously, but two role players that aren't necessarily used to the spotlight. Karis LeVert, Max Strus. Karis was implemented into the starting lineup, the six-man, somebody that is not used to playing as a starter because he's so comfortable in that 6-man role. And we talked to him about that last year. But the ability to slide in and play 35 minutes and be a second ball handler to attack the paint. And Karras talked about it before the game, or after the game. Kenny Atkinson texted him and was like, "Do you want to start?" And
yeah.
I think it's a level of respect between the two because they've known each other for so long, but also the understanding that if Karras was uncomfortable in the situation, Kenny wasn't going to do that to him. He was going to go in a different direction. And
Right.
I just wanted to pick your brain on what you thought was most impactful from Karras, because he had drives back to back to back, and then he also had defensive possessions that were huge. And we can go back to last night against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, where he was able to do that as well.
So I'm going to take you behind the scenes a little bit. I'm going to take the listeners behind the scenes a little bit too. I have a really, really good plugged-in source when it comes to gathering information during game days about what is being considered with the starting lineup, what is being considered when it comes to injury situations. And I usually get that information 4 to 5 hours before tip-off or something like that. And I reached out to my source earlier this afternoon and I said, hey, like, what's the thought behind what the Cavs are going to do in terms of starter for Donovan Mitchell, because Donovan's going to be resting. And that source told me that the coaches were still deliberating, that they were about to go in a meeting, an afternoon meeting, and they were about to like weigh all their different options. And at that time, I was told that, it was between Karras, it was going to be Max Strus in that conversation, and Ty Jerome as well. And it all checks out what Karras said in terms of like getting that text message. It happened after that powwow amongst the Cavs coaches when they wanted to decide, okay, in a collaborative way, what do you think is best for us to replace Donovan? What do you think we need the most against Toronto? And Kenny said it in the post game. He said, we felt like we needed the shot creation, the ball handling of Caris LeVert against this kind of defense. Toronto's not good. Everybody understands that. They've lost 15 of their last 16 games. They are headed straight to the lottery, and the roster composition that they have just doesn't make sense at all. But they're annoying, they're pesky, they're grimy. They can muck up the game on the defensive end. They can make you uncomfortable for stretches throughout the course of the game because of how handsy and physical they can be and aggressive they can be, especially at the point of attack. And, Kenny and the other coaches recognized that they needed somebody to deal with that kind of defense. And I think it came down to Ty or Karras. At various points this year, they've gone with Ty instead of Karras. But I think the other thing that they like about Karras, and it's another reason why they are considering Max, the energy. Karras is always going to bring it. You don't know what it's going to lead to, right? You don't necessarily know what the outcome is going to be, but he's going to bring it. He's going to provide energy. He's going to provide effort. And I think playing the second game of back-to-back, understanding just how much of an emotional letdown there was going to be going into this game against Toronto, something that Kenny Atkinson was worried about, something that the Cavs were trying to prepare for, something that the Cavs were trying to, overcome ahead of time. But there's always going to be a natural emotional letdown coming off that game with those stakes, with that level of intensity, that level of physicality, that level of pressure, that level of everything in the OKC game. And I think Kenny knew that was going to be the case. And I think he wanted to try and combat that. And I think he felt like he needed the energy and the effort that Karras is going to bring on a possession-to-possession base. In the first half, when it seemed like the Cavs were sleepy and lethargic, Karras was moving 100 miles an hour still. He was sprinting up and down the court. He was fighting through screens. He was catching passes that looked like they were going to sail out of bounds. Those are the things that you really, really like and value about Karras. So that, to me, stood out. Obviously, you can look at his playmaking. You can look at his shot making. You can look at the three-pointers that he hit for the team, timely ones at that. But to me, on a night that the Cavs needed energy and effort, and not everybody was going to be able to bring it to the same level, they knew that they could get that from Karras. And they know as this season goes on, they can always get that from Karras. And that's something that makes him such a reliable member of this rotation.
And Chris, I don't want to poke any bears here, but like I feel like a portion
That's code
of
for I'm about to poke some bears, folks.
All right. Well, I'm gonna do it. Try and do it politely, but I feel like the option of Max Strus being able to come off the bench and just provide so much that he does, the shooting, the speed, the pace, the just the physicality and the toughness and the leadership. Like, I think it also shows that the conversation for Max Strus to come off the bench for a majority of the season is still up in the air. And Kenny talked about that in his post game. It was like he's not committed to Max coming off the bench, but he loves it. Like,
right.
And it's an understanding that Dean Wade doesn't take shots away from anybody in the starting unit, right? He is a low volume, low need kind of guy that can add so much on the defensive end and still space the floor. And then you talk about Karis LeVert getting the start tonight. Obviously, it was matchup based, and Kenny has consistently talked about this. But if Kenny agrees that Karis and Max give a whole lot of energy, and I think he does, because when I asked him about what Max brings to the table, he said that he plays like a two-way player because of how hard he plays, because he's acting like he's still fighting for something. He's still playing for something to make his name known, basically. And I think it's interesting, just the conversation of, and this is going to be another conversation down the road when Isaac Okoro is healthy again. I feel like we keep saying that because nobody as a small forward has been healthy for the entire season. But like, for Max to be able to impact the game as much as he has coming off the bench, he hit 9 threes over the last 2 days off the bench. I think that's actually a viable option and reason to keep him there, not only as a playmaker, as a shooter, but as a leader off the bench as well.
Well, there's the other side of this, too. It's that what they're getting from Dean Wade in the starting lineup is really important to their success. So it's not a situation where you feel like you're missing out on something by having Dean in the starting lineup, or by looking at it in a situation where we don't have Max in the starting lineup, so we're missing this, and this. You know what I mean? Like, if the Cavs get to that point where they feel like something is missing from their starting lineup, then they feel like, okay, we consider a change. But they're 26-1 with Dean Wade in the lineup in any capacity, and I think it's now 16-1 with him as starter. Like, he's really, really good, and he's really, really impactful, and he's really, really effective with that particular grouping. That doesn't mean that he's going to finish games, and it doesn't mean that he's always going to play starters minutes. You know what I mean? But when you're on a roll like this, you try not to change too many things until you feel like there's a need to do that. And I just don't think that the Cavs have gotten to a point where they feel like there's a need to do that, nor do I feel like they should feel as if there's a need to do that. And I think you bring up a good point when it comes to Max. You know, there were questions that people inside this organization had about Max in the reserve role. Is that the best one for? I still think Kenny Atkinson is weighing all of this. Is that the best role for Max? Is that the best thing for us? Is that the best thing for the starting lineup? What's the best two-man combination for Max? Do we try and get him out on the floor more with Evan, or do we try and get him out on the floor more with Jarrett? Do we try and get him on the floor more with Donovan? Do we try and get him on the floor more with Darius? Like, all these things the Cavs are still trying to figure out because they just haven't gotten as many opportunities with Max because he wasn't there in the preseason. He wasn't there practicing for a majority of the first couple of months. And they're still trying to figure these things out with him. But if he's going to be okay with this role, and if the Cavs feel like it's a positive one for both Max and the team, then they can continue to get away with it and not have to worry about it and not feel like they're forced into making some kind of change or making some kind of decision. That's one of the things that is so impressive about this team is that these guys are willing to make whatever sacrifices required of them for the betterment of the team. And Max is included in that because he signed here a couple of years ago with essentially a promise that he was the starting small forward. That was appealing to him. The money was appealing. The situation was appealing. The team itself and the future of the team itself was appealing to him, but also the opportunity to start on a championship level team was appealing to him as well. He knew where his shots were going to come from. He knew what his minute allocation was going to be. He knew what kind of workload he was going to have. That has been different for Max this year. But Max, like everybody else, he's willing to accept that because he understands that right now, at this point, it's for the betterment of the Cavs. And all that matters is winning.
And I think that's beautifully said because we understand the competitor that Max Strus is.
Oh,
and
God, yeah.
I can hear him saying, like, I don't care. I want to win games. Like, that is something that would definitely come out of Max Strus's mouth when it comes to, like, how he operates, how he mentally competes. Like, we call Kenny Atkinson a psycho for his basketball. Like, Max Strus is a psycho when it comes to being a competitor. Like, if you read Chris's story about when Max was coming back, like, Max was on the couch playing video games. He hated it because he couldn't do it well. So he stopped doing it. There are certain people in this world that just simply love to win. And there's also people in this world that hate losing more than they like winning. Max Strus is one of those people, right? And I think it's interesting to also go into this conversation about Dean Wade. I know there are people that are looking at the box score and being like, he played 28 minutes and he had 5 points. Like, I hear you. He was 2 of 6 on the field, 105 from 3. Guess who had the second or third highest plus-minus rating on the team for the game? Dean Wade, right? He had 12. He is a plus 12. The top of that was plus 18. Darius Garland. The second best on the team, Sam Merrill, in his 12 minutes with a plus 13. And that's another conversation that I don't think people are like ready to have is just how good of a defensive player Sam Merrill has become this season. And I know the numbers are finicky, right? And they're weird because of like the minutes he's playing, who he's guarding, all these other things. But he is consistently attacked on the defensive end. And yet he has the second best defensive rating for the Cavs, a 105.5. Like, it's ridiculous to see how everybody on this team has not only bought into what they're doing on the offensive end, but also how they don't care about what the narrative was about them last year. They're rewriting it. They're saying, like, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Sam Merrill, guys you can attack on the defensive end. They're not doing that. Well, they are doing it. It's just not working, right? Donovan has the best defensive rating on the Cavs, which you wouldn't think because of what people have said about him in the past. I just think it's interesting, the whole dynamic of the team, where they're at, where they're going, and what they've been able to accomplish to this point because of everybody on this roster. And in a game where it was sluggish, slow, sleepy, and Kenny Atkinson literally said that the Darius Garland saved them, we can still talk about other players making an impact throughout the game that have consistently done that throughout the year.
Yes, and I think when it comes to Darius, I just posted this on X, formerly Twitter, just a little bit ago. But Ethan, honestly, I think the conversation surrounding Darius I think it's starting to shift from whether he's an all-star to whether there's a legitimate case for him to be voted as the second starter at guard. And look, there's 10 days remaining in the voting process for all-star starters, both when it comes to the fans and when it comes to media members and players. Darius is an all-star. He should be an all-star. He is one of the best point guards in the Eastern Conference. And if he's not voted in as a starter, coaches have to find a way to find a spot for him. They just have to make room for him. That's the bottom line, because he's been that good. He's been that impactful. He is so important to them being 33-4 at this point. As a voter, I am legitimately debating right now whether it's LaMelo. No, it's not. Come on. What are fans? No. And this is going to be interesting, too, because usually who wins the fan vote is who actually does get in as a starter. But I just think there are so many media members and so many players that are going to be like, how the hell do we vote for that guy? So it's going to be really, really interesting to see where LaMelo finishes amongst media members and players. And is it enough of a separator to allow somebody to kind of overtake him? In saying that, no, really, as a voter, I'm debating Trae Young versus Darius Garland versus Jalen Brunson. And I think it's a very, very difficult conversation because I think all of them have a legitimate case to be the second starter next to Donovan Mitchell. But this run that Darius is on recently, it is coming at the right time. And I think part of what the fuel behind it is where he was ranked, or not ranked, I should say, when the first fan returns came out. He was fully aware of that. The Cavs were practicing at SMU in nearby Dallas, and a number of the players had their phones out, and they were looking at where everybody was ranked. And the first thing that they noticed is that Darius wasn't anywhere to be found. And they were angry. And Darius was angry too. And he has taken it out on a lot of the teams that the Cavs have played since then. And in the words of Tristan Thompson, he has body bagged a lot of the point guards that the Cavs have played against since then as well. So I think it has become a legitimate debate. This whole push for Darius to be an all-star, and Kenny Atkinson brought it up tonight, and Ty Jerome brought it up again tonight, and Evan Mobley touched on it, and everybody in the universe talked about it. It's not just, is Darius an all-star this year? That shouldn't be a question to me. That has turned into a lock. I think there's a legitimate debate of whether he should start next to Donovan in the Eastern Conference. And that's not something that I would have thought about, 2 weeks ago. That's not something that I even would have considered 2 weeks ago. And like I said, Trae has a strong case. Atlanta melts when he is not on the floor. They have an offensive rating of 97 when he's off the floor. That is tragic. And when he's on the floor, it's something like 110 to 115. So the difference is almost 20 points per 100 possessions. It's outrageous, the difference between Atlanta with and without Trae, especially on the offensive end of the floor. So that is a legitimate debate, and he has a legitimate case. And by the way, he's tossing out assists like candy on Halloween. And Jalen Brunson, everybody gets it. He is the engine of the New York Knicks offense, and that is one of the best offenses in the NBA, just like the Cavs. So I think as this goes on, I think these next 10 days are pretty important. And I think when it comes to that position specifically, that's the one that is most up for grabs. Because the 3 forward spots are locked in. I think one of the guard spots is Donovan's. So it's just that second guard spot in the Eastern Conference. And I give Darius a ton of credit because he has made this a real debate.
Yep. And I was about to say, if you didn't say it yourself, just a couple days ago, you were like, they're not going to put both Cavs guards. Well,
nope.
We're having that conversation.
Darius is doing his part to make it a debate. He was so good tonight, and I think that was an important performance. The spotlight was on him. There was no Donovan Mitchell. Like, can Darius, take this team to the next level? It was Toronto. Toronto stinks. We all get that. But a 40 ball without Donovan Mitchell, that's like not somebody who's just riding a superstar's coattails, right? That's somebody who is also at the center of this offensive explosion that the Cavs have had. That's somebody who's at the center of them being on this historic pace. And it hasn't just been a one-night thing, right? He was really good against Oklahoma City. He was really good against LaMelo and Charlotte. He's been really, really good for an extended stretch. Hell, he's been really, really good since the beginning of the season. He's just been a different guy this year, completely different than what he was last year. And I think it probably took some people a little bit of time to come around on that and to recognize that, this isn't the Darius Garland from last year. And here are all the different reasons why. But I give him a ton of credit because he continues to make a loud statement about why he deserves not just an all-star berth, but a starting spot next to Donovan. And he's doing it with his play and sort of his words too, because he finally had enough of it last night and he decided to answer the question point blank.
Well, that was because of you. But anyway, just to end the podcast with some stats, because I feel like I'm the stats guy outside of Chris going more in depth. I'm very surface-based. Offensive rating. Offensive rating. Darius Garland, 126.4. The Cavs have an offensive rating of 126.4 when he's on the floor. Trae Young, the Hawks have a 114.6 offensive rating when he's on the floor. Jalen Brunson, 119.9. There is nearly a 10 point per 100 possessions gap between Darius Garland and the next best guard in the all-star starter conversation. This is, and obviously, Chris, you have to go into what the numbers are when he's off the floor and what that means for the New York Knicks and what that means for the Atlanta Hawks, which you touched on. But the Cavs having what they do, an offensive rating of what they do when he's on the floor, cannot go undershadowed by anything else that is going on around him because it's consistent and he's driving the offense. And Donovan understands that Darius has been driving the offense even when he is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Darius's offensive rating, 126.4, is almost 10 points better than Donovan Mitchell's, 117.3. So, we're talking about the gap between what these players are doing and what Darius Garland has risen to. And I feel like you're making an absolutely great point. Starter is where we're at, and then the conversation expands into later into the season if he continues this pace. And that's also where we're at with Evan Mobley as well, is what I feel.
Mm-hmm. So let's take that a step further because I think this is an important point. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I can tell you that statistically, the Cavs are, when the Cavs have Darius and no Donovan, they are better than when they play minutes with Donovan and no Darius. I think that's an important shift. That was not the case last year, certainly. Nothing close to that. But the Cavs are finding a way to be effective and still run high-level offense in the minutes that Donovan's not on the floor. That's really, really important to the growth and the evolution of this team. And to see it Wednesday night against Oklahoma City, where three other members of the core four, stepped up on a night that Donovan just did not have it. And then to see the impact that, again, it was Toronto and Toronto stinks, but to see the impact that Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, and Darius Garland were able to have and the effectiveness that they were able to have with Donovan on the sidelines in street clothes. That's big. Learning how to stand on their own without Donovan Mitchell. Like, they feel empowered. They're playing with a different level of confidence. They're playing with a different level of belief. And Kenny Atkinson, it was so funny because he came into the media center afterward and he said, I was ready for my post-game speech to all of you guys, and I was going to talk about how, stinkers happen in the NBA, and it's natural, and these guys are human, and the Oklahoma City game took a lot out of us, but Darius wouldn't let us lose. Darius saved us, and I don't entirely agree with that. Like, I think Jared Allen was a big part of it, and Mobley was a big part of it as well, and it's like, to see them still be this great team, and still see them overcome, whether it's tiredness, missing players, whatever it may be, because of Darius, because of Jarrett, because of Evan. That's why you have a core four. You know what I mean? Like, when one of them's down, the other three step up. When two of them don't have it, the other two are still there. That's the beauty of a core four. That's the beauty of a team concept, as opposed to like a heliocentric force that Donovan was last year, where the Cavs just completely crumbled when he wasn't out there, or when he was hurt, or when he was in foul trouble, whatever the case may be.
Kenny Atkinson compared Darius Garland to Stephen Curry tonight. He said that the jump that he's making, the development that he's having, the work that he's doing behind the scenes with his with the weight room, with his recovery, and how that has impacted how he's taken the next step. He said it reminded him of the player that he coached when they won a championship, and how they needed to do that to win a championship. And I think that is not only a testament to what Darius has done because of the fractured jaw, because of all the face injuries, because of all the different things that people wanted to talk about over the beginning portions of his career. Like, he cares more. He wants to be there. He understands how important he is to this team. And I don't think this is, I think this is the best indication of that over the last two games, with especially Donovan not having his best game, or simply not being out there. So I think him being able to be compared to somebody that is a smaller guard, that is taken over the NBA, that has a similar style of play, shiftiness, three-point shooting, a floater at the rim, whatever you want to describe it as, I think that is not only the motivating factor that he needs, but it's the reality of what Jimmy was talking about yesterday, that stars are not being born, they're being created by the opportunities that they're getting and how they're being able to mold themselves behind the scenes. And I think we're making crazy takes, or not as crazy takes as people might think. But if Darius Garland continues on the trajectory that he's on, he could and has the personality to be one of the stars on the NBA by the time his career is over.
And let's make this clear so that people don't start freaking out. When Kenny Atkinson draws the comparison to Steph Curry, he's not talking about Darius's shooting ability. He's not talking about his acumen. He's not saying that Darius is going to be this transcendent player that Steph has been for the last decade plus, that has revolutionized the game of basketball. He's talking about the commitment to his craft. He's talking about his attention to detail when it comes to the behind-the-scenes stuff, to get his body in the best shape ever. Like, if you remember, Steph early in his career, he was dealing with all these ankle injuries, and people were wondering, is he ever going to be the player that he was at Davidson? Is he ever going to be a guy that can be the focal point of a franchise, or is he too fragile? Is he too injury prone? And that's what Kenny Atkinson is talking about, the seriousness that Darius Garland is now taking when it comes to his body, his recovery, eliminating some things from his personal life and focusing more on the day-to-day craft of basketball and those kinds of things. The seriousness that he's taking to become a great player. That's what he saw with Steph Curry. That's the comparison that he makes. So we can calm down. People always get carried away, especially when we bring these things up. How could Kenny Atkinson say that? Are you kidding? How could you disrespect Steph Curry like that? Nobody's saying Darius Garland is going to be the greatest shooter in NBA history. But the things that he saw behind the scenes with Steph, the commitment, the details, the eliminating things from his diet so that his body can be the best that it can be. What did Kenny say? Steph learned that his body was a temple, and he treated it that way. That's what Darius is starting to do as well. Or there's more of a commitment to doing that from Darius. And that's the comparison that Kenny Atkinson is drawing, just so that everybody is on the same page with that.
I appreciate the clarity and clarification. But I stand on what I said. Like, I still do think that if Darius is able to clean up some things, to continue to focus on his health, his craft, and all those different things, like he's showing over the last couple of weeks, like as Tristan Thompson said, I don't get tired of saying it, body bag. Like consistently, whoever you have thrown in front of Darius Garland, body bag. And I think that's a testament to him and what he's done, but also where he's going and where his career is going.
The other thing with Darius, Ethan, and you brought it up, like he is a guy who has the play style that attracts a younger demographic. He is the guy that has the kind of play style that is fun. It's filled with joy. He's a little bit cocky, but the passes that he makes, the dribbling that he can do, the three-pointers, the celebration after that, like the fun that he has, all of those things, like that's relatable to people. People latch on to those sorts of things. That's what they loved about Steph Curry. Oh, Jesus, here I go again with the comparisons. Like, what are you doing? Stop with the Steph stuff. But like, they loved those elements of Steph, right? They loved those elements of Ja before he, had all of his off the court troubles. That kind of player is attractive. That's the kind of player that fans gravitate toward. Darius was getting MVP chance at the end of the game tonight. A little bit outlandish, but he was getting MVP chance. Like Darius has a shoe. New Balance. You know what I mean? Like stylistically, Darius is a fun when Darius is playing at this level, this all-star level, he has a fun style that a lot of people, if he gets more opportunities on the big stage, if he gets more opportunities in the spotlight, like he's the kind of guy that I could see young basketball fans saying, yeah, I'm going to watch him some random Wednesday night against the yeah, I'm going to watch him. Man, he's really cool. He's got a fun game. His style, yeah, I like it. And it's not like a situation. The other thing that I feel like people liked about Steph is that, not that they could be him, but like, nobody's going to be LeBron. LeBron is this physical specimen that was almost created in a lab. Like, how do you emulate that? How do you go in the backyard and emulate that? You don't.
You lower the rim. You lower the rim to like 5 feet.
Like the Steph stuff, these kids that are growing up, they're like, shoot, man, I could go to half court and chuck some jumpers. Shoot, man, I can make these lefty layups. Like, it's easier to relate to Steph because, like, he's not considered this genetic freak of nature that was created in a lab. It's easier to emulate his style. It's not easy, but it's easier than it is to be like 6'9", 4'40", and 260 pounds of yoke. You know what I'm saying? Like, And it's the same thing with Darius. Like, the things that he does on the basketball court, like, you feel if you work hard enough, probably wrong at this, but if you feel like you work hard enough, like, those are things that you can probably do in your driveway, or those are things that you can do at the YMCA, or those are things that you can go do at Cahoon Park if you want to, here in Bay Village, the lovely Bay Village, if you want to go play at Cahoon Park. I'm often there in the summertime. So it's like, it's different. Like, it's not Giannis, it's not Wemby, it's not Embiid, it's not Jokic. It's like a 6'1" point guard with great handles and an unbelievable shooting touch. And, I don't want to downplay all of the good things about Darius, but like, it's more relatable for somebody who is picking up a basketball and loves the game of basketball.
And as Steph's career winds down, like,
oh no, not
I
Steph
think
again.
Let's wrap up here, okay? Because I tried to say this kind of earlier, right? With what you said about the size and the handle, like, it's more relatable and people can emulate it better. But like, as Steph's career winds down, I think it might be better for not only the NBA, but like elementary, middle school, high school coaches that keep seeing these kids chuck up threes from half court, from 40 feet, from whatever, because they have seen it on the television and they want to be Steph. Like, Darius doesn't do those things. Darius might pull up from 30 and hit a shot, but he is a guy that does things the right way while having fun. And it's not like, and again, the relatability of what Darius Garland has been able to do, plus his personality, plus his style, I think that's the perfect kind of player that the NBA is looking for, not only because of what he means to the game, but also the future of it because of players coming up that are going to try and be like him. And as you said, not everybody is going to be able to go to the backyard and dribble like Darius, but there will be a few that if they look at him and watch tape, just like he's told me afterwards that he watched tape on Steph growing up, like some people, some players, some gifted players will have the ability to try and emulate that, and then potentially even smaller of a percentage make it to the NBA and showcase that as well. But alrighty, with that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. Yes, we have one more episode for the week. We will be recording a Hey Chris episode tomorrow for Saturday, and it is something that you don't want to miss. And you can be a part of. Send in your questions, but the only way to do that is if you sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who signed up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage of the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.